go ahead then with our program this evening. I've got a couple opening remarks before I introduce Barış. So we'd like to thank Tutku Tours, Tutku Educational Travel for sponsoring this webinar tonight. This builds on their annual guide seminar that was conducted in January, where Barış did his presentation to tour guides and other interested people in Turkish. And that was so well received and so interesting that we talked, and Levent said, well, let's invite Barış to do this in the context of a global webinar event because of the great interest in Colossae. And I can tell you, as well as the Tutku team, that whenever we go to America for our conferences every year, the question we get asked over and over again is, what's happening at Colossae? You know, the excavation started there. So there's tremendous interest in Colossae around the world among Christians interested in Bible history and archaeology. So it's wonderful for this to be organized this evening. I think most of you are aware of Tutku Educational Travel, the tours they do, fam trips to various countries in the Eastern Mediterranean. And many of you are leaders for university, seminary, or church groups that come to various countries here in the Eastern Mediterranean, including Turkey, to visit the biblical sites. And so, again, just consult the Tutku website for just ongoing tours that are going on. And Levent is a real planner, so you can see even years ahead some of the wonderful tours that are being planned. And so I'd like to personally thank the Tutku personnel, besides Levent, Cenk Aranat, who is with us, Cüneyt Aral for the support that he gives, especially with the tech, Aaron Daly, who's here with us again. And you can contact any of those individuals if you have any questions related to tours, etc. So once again, we thank you for that. And this webinar will be recorded. It will be available in about a week, hopefully, after Cüneyt does some editing on the Tutku website under the news section. So I know I've had emails from a number of people saying that they're in church or somewhere else this morning. They can't watch it live, but they're very excited to be able to see the recording. Just one of the things I mentioned, we are all living in a real world as historians, scholars, scientists, and one of the things unfolding to the north of us right now is a horrific war that's happening in Ukraine. Many of you know Natalie Aral, the wife of Levent, who also is part of the Tutku team. She is Ukrainian, and we send our prayers, our wishes to her this evening as she is very concerned about friends and family and loved ones who are in Ukraine right now. So Natalie, we send those good wishes to you here this evening. One of the things we've been getting also is some emails from people asking whether the conflict, which is obviously hundreds of miles north of Turkey, will affect tours. Presently, there is no effect at all for the tours that will be held. I will, in fact, will begin meeting a group here in a week and starting one of the fam trips, both in Turkey and Greece as we go forward. So regarding protocol tonight, we have 3 speakers. They will each be making a presentation. I'll introduce each one of them before they speak, so you don't forget who they are. We will not take questions till the end. So if you want to jot down a question at the end, we will entertain those and take those live. And just want to remind you that when we get to the Q&A portion, this is for questions. They're not for extended comments, okay? So just, you can do those offline, okay? But these are for questions for the speakers here tonight. So let me begin with our first speaker, Barış Yener, and I've become acquainted with Barış through the years through my many visits to Laodicea, or Laodicea, as we say in Turkey. And always he's been very gracious and showing us the site and helping our groups, the Tutku groups, visit Laodicea. Barış received his undergraduate degree in classical archaeology from Ege University in Izmir. Then he did his master's and PhD degrees from Pamukkale University's Institute of Archaeology. And there his thesis focused on the architectural decoration in Roman Laodicea. He's currently an instructor, öğretmen görevlisi in the Department of Classical Archaeology at Pamukkale University. And since 2006, he's worked on the excavations at Laodicea from the beginning, where he served as vice director, as well as head of ground penetrating radar systems for geophysical surveys. So that picture you see in the poster shows him with the equipment there strapped to his chest as he's walking around doing the survey work. It's very impressive, Barış. He's also been involved in that capacity as well at the excavations at Tripolis. He's co-published several articles based on his research, including a portrait sculpture of Augustus from Alabanda and Caria, and ampullae with figural depictions from Laodicea of late antiquity. And in 2021, Barış and his team began the long-awaited survey work on Colossae, which we will hear about today. So I'll turn it over to you, Barış, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. And hello, everyone. I'd like, first of all, to thank the organizers of this meeting for inviting me here today. As you can see on the screen, our topic today is latest archaeological surveys in Colossae. I'd like to present the results of our research in 2021 campaign, but I'll start off by a brief history of Colossae and its location. Then I'll move on to our main subject. Colossae is located on the Lycus Valley to the south of the Meander River, around 25 kilometers east of modern Denizli, in the southwest of Phrygia, the ancient region of Phrygia. It is positioned on the roads opening to Ephesus here, and in the west, Sardis in the north, Patara on the south via Kubura, and the Iconium via Apamea on the east, providing a geographical transition point between the inner regions and the coast. The city derives its importance from the geographical position and its establishment earlier than other cities in the Lycus Valley, such as Laodicea, Tripolis, and Hierapolis. As you know, especially in Roman imperial periods, Laodicea and Hierapolis were metropolitans of this region. And there are also some important cities you see from the south side below the Salbakos mountains, Aphrodisias, Heraclea, Apollonia, like this. The double cone hill, that is, I trace it with a circle, with red circle here, the Acropolis of the Colossae here. It is a double cone hill, which is appropriate to be described as the Acropolis of the ancient city, offers the most distinctive archaeological panorama of the city that has been preserved until today. The hill in question is located at the 3rd kilometer of the sub-road connected to Denizli-Afyon-Ankara highway. You can see here this main road connected till to Ankara. To the center of Honas, the modern Honas is here in the south. The Biconical Mount is the remaining prominent identifying feature for Colossae, but it was located within a larger urban complex. Today, the height of the mount from the valley plain is approximately 30 meters, and its height above the sea level is 383 meters. It lies an area of 9 hectares. Here is, you can see in American system, 22 acre. surrounded by the modern vineyards, you can see here, and the orchards. Considering the damage caused by agricultural activities around the Acropolis, it can fairly be calculated that the area of the original mount would have exceeded 12 hectares. The ancient city and its surroundings were declared as first and third degree archaeological site for the first time in 1986, and the boundaries of preservation area was re-examined and expanded 2013. All the first and third degree archaeological sites of the city are spread over an area of 172 hectares, is 425 acres, in total with 90-30 parcels. The areas here you can see the painted with green is the area of necropolis here and the mound. And our first archaeological discoveries inside the preservation area is these areas. Although not certain as to identification, Colossae is probably the city referred to as Hualusia or Hualusa in Hittite texts. Firstly, in the time of the Hittite king Tutalia I, Hualusa was mentioned as a state in Asua League. Asua was a confederation of 22 ancient states of Western Asia Minor that formed sometime before 400 BC to oppose the Hittite Empire, which defeated it under Tutalia I. Secondly, Murshili II carried out punitive campaigns against the region of Arzava. You can see here within the boundaries, you can see it, Colossae is within the boundaries of Arzava. In the first 2 years of his reign, secured his kingdom's borders and sent his commander Aranzapilli to the lands of Hualusia. You can see here, I sent him forth to Hualusa and he destroyed the country of Hualusia. Although the name Hualusa seems to be close to the name Colossae linguistically and phonetically, but it is hard to prove this connection definitely with the current archaeological information. The name Colossae was first mentioned by Herodotus in his histories. Herodotus named Colossae as one of the important cities of Phrygia, but did not give detailed information. However, he stated that Xerxes crossed a city called Anawa and the lake with the same name while going to the campaign against Greece in 480 BC. And reached Colossae. He held that among the cities through which he passed, this one was a great Phrygian city. You can read in Greek letters here, Polin oikomenen, kai eudomena, kai megalen, big and prosperous city, Colossae. Another ancient writer who mentioned the city was Xenophon in his book Anabasis, The Return of the 10,000. The writer had participated in Cyrus' campaign in 401 BC against his brother, the Persian king Artaxerxes. Xenophon related that the army of Cyrus stopped over in Colossae, given that the city was large and rich. We also know of a Colossian commander named Areus, who commanded the Asian army of 10,000 soldiers. Areus is next recorded in 395 BC when he has involved in the assassination of Tissaphernes, the Lydian satrap. When the Persian king Artaxerxes grew angry with Tissaphernes, incompetence with his battles with the Greeks, perhaps even suspecting him of betrayal, and Areus was ordered to kill him. So Areus invited Tissaphernes to visit him at his residence in Colossae to discuss important business. Tissaphernes was unsuspicious, leaving behind his bodyguard. When he arrived, he set aside his sword and went into a bath. Areus' men seized him there and he was beheaded. We don't have any ancient sources relating to the Hellenistic period of Colossae. However, pottery findings during previous research and two types of Hellenistic coins are known. The coin on the left, this one, you can see head of a Apollo and obverse on the obverse and a Colossean inscription. You can maybe read it in Greek letters, Colosseon here. Around the Kitara figure, the inscription around the Kitara figure. And on the right coin, head of Zeus on the obverse and the Colossean inscription here around the winged thunderbolt on the reverse is seen. Both of them is dated before 200 BC in Hellenistic times. Strabo, when referring to Phrygian cities, mentioned Colossae among the small cities of the region. In keeping with the information given by Strabo, we conclude that the city in the 1st century BC was considerably diminished from its old magnificence and size. You can see here in the first text, Strabo mentioned that above the city, mentioned about also the earthquakes in Colossae. Above the cities lies Mount Cadmos, modern Honas mountain, whence the Lycus flows, as does also another river of the same name as the mountain, but the Lycus flows under the ground for the most part, and then after emerging to the surface, unites with the other rivers, thus indicating that the country is full of holes and subject to earthquakes. The other text from Strabon is about the trade and textile production in the city. The country around Laodicea produces sheep that are excellent, not only for the softness of their wool, in which they surpass even the Milesian wool, but also for its raven black color, so that the Laodiceans derive splendid revenue from it, as do also the neighboring Colossini from the color which bears the same name. And Pliny, less than a century later, recalled Colossae as one of the most important cities of Phrygia. When the information given by the two ancient writers is considered, it may be said that the city had lost its previous importance in the 1st century BC, but appears to have revived early in the 2nd century AD and become again one of the significant cities of the region. Again, in Herodotus, we reached the information about Aksu River. There's a photo from Aksu River, a very interesting geological area. About Aksu River, Colossae, a great city of Phrygia, where the river Lycus falls into an opening of the earth and disappears from view. And then after an interval of about 5 stadia, is approximately 800-900 meters, it comes up to view again, and this river also flows into the meander. And in Plinius, he mentioned that at Colossae is a river, and bricks, when cast into it, are of stone when taken out. Émile Camus is a French engineer who has left an interesting description of his visit to Colossae in April 1894, describes how the pedals of the water mill located just to the west of the Church of St. Michael are daily covered by the petrifying waters of the Aksu with a calcareous deposit, which must be removed before it hardens if the moving parts are to be prevented from turning entirely to stone in a very brief period. You can see here an aerial photograph of this remains of a water mill here. It's really a petrifying construction structure. We can trace it in our campaign. Colossae is located at the southeast end of the Denizli Basin, where the main border faults of the basin converge and meet. The most evident structure is the active fault that Crossus, you can see here, through Honas, ancient Konai here. At the base of Mount Honas, about 3 kilometers south of Colossae. Historically, Denizli Basin suffered many strong earthquakes due to the presence of important cities like Hierapolis and Laodicea. Historical records of past earthquakes in this region are relatively abundant. The destructive effects of the earthquakes are well documented by archaeological evidence in Roman and Byzantine stratigraphy. The strongest and most famous event was the so-called Neronian earthquake of 60 AD, and this earthquake was mentioned by the ancient writers Tacitus, Orosius, and Eusebius with some chronological differences. Sorry. Colossae was completely destroyed in the 60 AD earthquake, and the city's recovery took place in Hadrian period during the beginning of the second century. It is understood that the Colossae lived in a hiatus chronologically for about 60 years and minted coins in its name only during in the Hadrianic period. You can see the Hadrianic period here, coins of Hadrianic period with the personification of Lycus with a wolf and Zeus here, and the city goddess Artemis attribute a figure of deer here. In Colossae, which was mentioned in a letter accredited to St. Paulus, Christianity spread in the 1st century AD via the activities of Epaphras, one of the friends of St. Paulus. The letter, taken as written to the people of Colossae by St. Paul, contains important information for the history of Christianity in the region, and the miracle happened at this time, so-called the Apparition of Archangel Michael. Tradition says that pagans decided to destroy the sanctuary at Colossae, where the local priest Archippus, the eyewitness of the apparition, lived. To this end, they diverted a watercourse toward the temple, attempting to submerge area. Invoked by Archippus, the archangel appeared and striking the rock with his staff, opened a wide fissure in the earth and channeled a new path for the flowing waters. The name of the new settlement was derived from the fissure Konai. Another meaning is funnel. This legend was strongly believed, and the sanctuary at the site of the apparition became a famous destination for the pilgrimage through centuries, until it was suppressed after the collapse of the Byzantine Empire till to the 13th century. The Church of St. Michael thought to have originated sometime in the 4th century AD, indicates that Colossae was active within the region in the late Roman period. However, no remains of this church have been found yet. The name Colossae was mentioned also in the Second Council of Nicaea, held in 787 AD. Colossae was damaged considerably in the Arab invasions of the 7th to 8th centuries AD. The city became smaller. You can see an engraving of Arundel from 1834, and here is Konai. You can see the fortification walls of this settlement. Some of the people moved to Konai, modern Honas, established on the lower ridge of Mount Kadmos. Besides the Arab invasions, the plague outbreak during the reign of Justinian and Constantine V also impoverished many cities and led to a decrease in population. Sardis, Pergamon, Miletos, Priene, Magnesia, among the key cities in Western Anatolia, became small castle-like cities. Laodicea was mostly abandoned. Hierapolis became smaller. Tough, it continued to survive for a while. In 1858 AD, Konai was turned into an archiepiscopal center, to which episcopacies in the vicinity were affiliated. Colossae, therefore, had returned to be one of the important cities in the region. Historian Niketas Koinates mentioned at least the St. Michael Church visited by the Byzantine Emperor Manuel Komnenos before the Myriokephalon War. The emperor set out from the queen of the cities in summer 1176, passing through both Phrygia and Laodicea, and came to Honai, a prosperous and great city, the ancient Colossae, this author's homeland. He entered the enormous church of the Archangel Michael, incomparable in beauty and the marvel of craftsmanship, and then marched on to Lampe and the city of Kelaine. The first research on the city were made by travelers in the early 19th century, with Europe's interest in discovering ancient connections. During this period, various countries, especially France, Germany, and England, competed with each other for discoveries that could end up in their national museums. By that time, however, nearly 150 years of potential record had been lost for Colossae. During this time, the city continued to be a quarry for the locals, doomed to lose stone material for new construction projects, agricultural activities, and even lime production. The destruction of Colossae and its surroundings caused very little to be admired by the Europeans of the city. In particular, Thomas Smith, in the guidebook he prepared 2.5 centuries ago, wrote in a contemptuous manner of Colossae, there is not much to see. You can see the earliest photograph of Colossae of the site. There is nothing to see. Also in 1895, today it's the same. A priest, Lord George Lampakis, visited the main church used by the Greeks in Honas in 1909. According to the photo taken outside the church, it's observed that the Corinthian capitals, you can see here, possibly belonging to Colossae, not possibly, is very, not possibly, but it's, we can say it could be from Colossae, were made upside down as pedestals for the pillars supporting to the forecourt porch. Now these capitals are used as the stands of the coffin rest. This is the new mosque now in Honas, in the garden of the building, which has been converted into a mosque. The Colossae Archaeological Survey primarily focuses on the mapping and documentation of visible remains, remote sensing, geophysical survey, collection and examination of surface finds, and development of a long-term conservation and management plan. Accordingly, the project is based on several research interests, improve the chronology revealed by pottery analysis, the strategic importance of the city of Colossae for the Persian Empire, and the nature of the Iron Age city, which we have limited information about this. The accuracy of the theoretical information presented that the importance of the city decreased with the Hellenistic period. Along with the imperial period, the earthquake in 60 AD and its effect on the socio-economic life of the city, determination of the borders, settlement model, socio-economic structure, and chronology of Konai on the slope of Mount Honas, which was called Castle with the Turkification of the region. In line with the objectives we have set 2021, studies of the archaeological surveys carried out in the Acropolis, the northern and the northwestern Acropolis areas, and the close vicinity of the city. You can see the red line is showing the third degree preservation area. Our study survey area is here, especially at the north necropolis. An intensive survey also was carried out on the upper terrace, which constitutes the highest point of the Acropolis in terms of height. Here, this is a biconical, double conical mount. We made some intensive survey studies at this, the highest level. You can see here the orthophoto of this small area at the top of the mountain. The entire area in question was divided into grids measuring 20 by 20 meters, and each grid was divided into also 5 by 5 meters and converted into pottery gathering areas. The pottery shards determined on the surface within the divided areas were photographed in the coordinates they were found in, documented and dated. These studies continued from the first day to the last day of the survey, and the intensive survey was completed by 2021. A total of 1,650 pottery shards were evaluated from the gridded areas on the Acropolis. It presented a continuous chronology starting from the late Chalcolithic period, early bronze, middle bronze, late bronze, Iron Age, Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, and Seljuk period. You can see here the earliest material from the upper mount, upper terrace, and Hellenistic and Roman, and the late Byzantine and Seljuk period pottery shards. What you see here as purple dots here represents early Chalcolithic period, while red dots here represent late Chalcolithic period pottery shards. These are the earliest proofs of the material culture in Colossae. In addition, all of the early, middle, and late stages of the Bronze Age are observed in the city. While no distinguishable example of the early and middle phases of the Iron Age, one example here from the late Iron Age was dated to the second half of the 6th century BC, which have a marble imitation paint we know closely from the Lydian pottery tradition, especially from Sardis. A significant part of the finds found on the Acropolis collection areas are pottery from the Hellenistic, Roman, and Byzantine periods. Hellenistic fragments include Greek-ware, mold-made bowls, and lead-glazed pottery. Considering the finds of Hellenistic period, it's understood that it has a very dense and homogeneous distribution on the hill. You can trace it in here. While this situation reflects the opposite of the theory that the importance of the city decreased during the Hellenistic period, it is noteworthy that even Hellenistic molds were found in previous studies, shows a proof for pottery production also in Colossae. There are red slate pottery from the Roman periods, while Byzantine pottery, which forms a large group in the gathering areas, are mostly represented by coarseware groups, and few examples from the Seljuk period have a green glazed decoration. We have 2 fragments from the Seljuk period. The most striking data among the Byzantine period finding in this area is the understanding that the material culture continued in the Colossae during the period when the city was moved to the new settlement, Konai. As a result, our survey data, which was conducted in a limited area, have proven that the Colossae has a continuous settlement chronology starting from the late Chalcolithic period to the early Chalcolithic period to the Seljuks, generally till to the end of 13th century. Another mission carried out on the Acropolis is to obtain the coordinates of the architectural material visible on the surface with the help of the course device, and to draw the topographic plan of the Acropolis. In line with these works, the coordinates of some wall blocks observed on the northern, eastern, and western slopes of the area within the boundaries of the highest point of the hill. As a result of the placement of the in situ blocks, which form a smooth line as far as can be followed in the field, on the topographic plan, it's understood that the upper terrace of the Acropolis was fortified with a separate fortification wall. The fact that the fragments of wall blocks that can be seen on the surface are of different types and sizes, and that spolia material indicate that the defense system in this area may have belonged to the late antiquity or Seljuk period. In particular, the late Byzantine and Seljuk period pottery found in the collection areas and the Mikhail Dukas VII coin also confirm this theory. You can see here on the left photo, on the obverse of the coin, there is the Pantocrator Christ here, who is depicted holding a book in his hand, and on the reverse, there is a cross with floral ornaments placed on the globes. It was also determined that as a result of the follow-up coordinates studies carried out along the south, east, and west slopes at the lower terrace of the Acropolis, this hill may also be surrounded by the city wall in the same way the whole mount probably survived, encircled with a fortification wall. The measurements of the theater, which is the only remaining structure in the city that can be viewed from the surface, have been completed. The form, dimensions, and the walls and part of the scattered steps of the theater were identified. The stage of the theater faces east. The diameter of the semicircular theater is 64 meters from the outside and 47 meters from the inside. Due to agricultural activities and the easy accessibility of the upper cavea of the theater, you can see a modern road here, very easy to reach the cavea of the theater. The coordinates of the few sitting blocks that have slipped downwards in the cavea of the building, which was heavily damaged, were added into the city plan. In our research on the lower terraces of the Acropolis, besides the documentation of various architectural blocks, a column capital with an inscription was documented, a donation made by an Euergetes. You can see here the in Greek letters, Euerget is a benefactor whose name cannot be read clearly, is mentioned on the inscription. Proceeding in the south direction of the Acropolis, architectural blocks belonging to possible urban structures such as regularly cut travertine blocks, postaments, or column pieces that have been preserved are usually encountered among the orchards. Another important piece of data is in the research carried out in the southwest of the Acropolis is the documentation of the pipe system placed in the travertine blocks of the water line that supplies the city with water from this direction at the south direction. You can see the travertine, they insert the water pipes to the travertine blocks here. The water possibly taken from the springs on the slopes of the Mount Honaz was brought to the city center by the travertine pipeline. This is the Turkish locals called it Göz or Pınarbaşı. It's a main springs in the Mount Kadmos. However, the pipeline in question, which was destroyed as a result of agricultural activities in the southwest direction cannot be followed, but this is a theory. Maybe they bring water from Pınarbaşı spring to the Colossi from the south side. As a result of the extensive pedestrian survey conducted around the city during the 2021 campaign, it was understood that the Colossi necropolis spreads along with the travertine rocky areas with red painted area. We found many types of tombs there. On the north and northeast side of the Acropolis is here, the Aksu River here, and Aksu Valley on the northwest side. While mostly rock cut, in its archaeological terminology, they called it Kamasorian type tombs were observed in this section, a total of 138 rock cut tombs, which became visible as a result of agricultural activities and illegal excavations, and a total of 15 tomb lids, complete and broken, were documented. The rock cut Kamasorian type tombs are usually arranged side by side in large groups. You can see this photo, the Kamasorian type of rock cut tombs here, and such a way that the rock floor is used most sparingly. About 500 meters north of the Acropolis, some stelae were documented together with many Kamasorian type tombs, which were also found to have been destroyed by thieves. As a result of the documentation work carried out in this area, which presents the most concentrated data on the necropolis area of the city, a total of 26 grave stelae, most of them broken and missing, were recorded and catalogued. It is understood that grave stelae in question were moved due to agricultural activities, mostly by being dragged to the field borders and rocky areas that are not suitable for agriculture. You can see the most of stelae is in original positions here, moved and dragged like this, and broke some pieces. In general, Colossi stelae described as, at the bottom, a base with an average size of 80 by 80 centimeters, the main body placed on a profile section here, used in the transition from the base to the body, and the typology with a triangular pediment, you can see here, and also in the drawing like this, on which a transition is provided by a profile section is observed. Stelae, heights vary, and some inscripted samples belonging to the owner of the tomb were identified on a total of 3 documented in the area, and they were catalogued and recorded. You can see here one of them, one inscripted one here, To minemenon patrastu kaites günay kos autotata, the funerary monument of Patrastos and his wife Tata. The another one, I think it's published by Alan Cadwallader, Epictetos kai Ariste güne auto, Epictetos and Ariste, his wife. Moving east on the northern slopes of the Aksu Valley, a tomb type here, which has not been documented before, was encountered. This tomb, which is reminiscent of the Phrygian rock-cut tombs, is one of the rare examples documented in the Denizli region, with a triangular pediment on a single entrance here and 2 side-by-side rooms. Considering the general form of the tomb, the rocky slope was cut and leveled approximately 1 meter. It's understood that a short entrance was created by carving and the door was placed in this section. During the 2021 season of the Colossi Archaeological Survey Project, The chronological development of the city and the determination of the settlement areas were carried out as a result of the necropolis spreading area and tomb types of the city, the preparation of the coordinated maps of the settlement that have never been made before, and the evaluation of the ceramic finds, pottery finds, studies to determine the settlement pattern in the south and southeast directions of the Acropolis will continue in the upcoming seasons. I'd like to thank also my team members a lot for their valuable effort in the field. And also many thanks for our supporters, and thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Barış. Let's give him some virtual applause for that excellent presentation.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure there's a lot of questions that are in your mind as a result of this. So please jot those down, and we'll pick them up at the end of our presentation. So anyway, fantastic. So our next speaker, Clint Arnold, is a longtime friend of mine. I was thinking how long it was. It's almost 30 years, I think, Clint, that we've known one another. Clint is the Dean and Professor of New Testament Language and Literature at Talbot School of Theology at La Mirada, California. And he's currently serving as the Vice President of the Evangelical Theological Society. Clint has had a long-time interest in the historical and cultural setting of the New Testament, particularly the letters of the Apostle Paul. And as a result of this, he was chosen to be the editor of one of the first commentary series that dealt with material culture, which was the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary. And in that, he wrote the commentaries on Acts, Ephesians, and Colossians. And as a personal aside, I want to thank Clint for having confidence in inviting a new scholar like myself to actually contribute to that series with the volume on Revelation. And the rest is history for me, but that's really my first opportunity to participate in a project. And for that, I'm eternally grateful to you, Clint. So it was just a great opportunity to work with you. He later became the general editor of the Zondervan Exegetical Commentary on the New Testament. And for that, he wrote the volume on Ephesians. I think most of us know his two volumes, the Ephesians, Power and Magic, and then his volume, The Colossian Syncretism. And so with that background, he has much to speak about the Lycus Valley and Colossae tonight. His research articles have appeared in such prestigious journals as New Testament Studies, Novum Testamentum, and the Journal for the Study of the New Testament. And this evening, Clint is going to be speaking on how the excavation of Colossae could help illuminate Paul's letter to the Colossians. So we look forward to your presentation, Clint. And thanks for getting up so early in California for us.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a little jarring to hear you talk about evening when we're just drinking our coffee and waking up, but this is where we're at. Hey, I want to begin this presentation just by saying how thrilled I am that the ancient site of Colossae will finally be excavated. I know there's so many people thrilled about that as well. Well, I first visited the site in 1985 and have looked forward to the day that the many mysteries that remain buried at Colossae will finally come to light. So I want to express my appreciation to Dr. Chalal Shimshek and Pamukkale University for the work they have done in making this excavation become a reality. And I'm also grateful for Dr. Barış and his work in leading this team. We really look forward to what you find and look forward to just following the progress of this excavation over time. Professor Shimshek has done a marvelous job of excavating the nearby site of Laodicea. And at this point, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this works well. Okay, I think you can see that. Beginning in 2003, Professor Szymczak has directed extensive excavations at Laodicea. His emphasis on investment into the careful restoration and preservation of the site has been exemplary and sets a high standard. And the pace of the excavation and restoration work has been rapid, along with many significant discoveries. One of Szymczak's students, Bahadur Duman, has been put in charge of the excavation at Tripolis at the northwest end of the Lycus Valley on the Meander River. And now we will benefit from another of Szymczak's students, Barış Yener, who will carry on the outstanding work of his mentor. What I've pictured here on this slide is a picture that they call Temple A at Laodicea, but you can see the reconstruction work that has taken place. All of this was, of course, fallen and buried before the excavation began. When my wife, Barbara, and I visited the site 37 years ago, it was before, and I'm speaking of the site of Colossae right now, it was before there was a paved road. There was no signage marking how to get to the site or even the location. I only knew that it was a short distance north of Honaz. And after beating around on dirt roads looking for the site, we finally gave up and stopped for lunch at a local restaurant. Since American tourists were incredibly rare in this area at the time, a couple of friendly Turkish men introduced themselves to us and asked us what we were looking for. And I told them and showed them pictures of the site, and they insisted on helping us find it. So we hopped into the back of Shevki's 64 Chevy Impala, and after talking to a couple of farmers, they got us to the site of Colossae. We were so grateful for these gracious hosts who were so proud of their country and its rich history and had a marvelous time with them. As you can see on the site there was fresh grading that had been done, apparently for some kind of water project. And it was a bit distressing to see bits and pieces of building material that were moved out of the way for this project that took place. Many Christians have a deep and inherent interest in the site of Colossae, because it was not only the site of a first century Christian church, but it was the destination of the New Testament letter called Colossians. It was likely also the destination for another New Testament letter called Philemon. Before I turn to the letter to the Colossians, I would say that everyone who has visited the site and explored the area around it has been deeply curious about many things we've seen protruding from the ground that are largely buried. Professor Yener explained some of these things, and we look forward to what he finds. And it will be profoundly interesting and satisfying to finally see what the soil of the Acropolis Mound has hidden for centuries. It will be fascinating also to see what lies hidden in the areas surrounding the Acropolis Mound and in the necropolis just to the north. It was gratifying to see some of this has already been discovered and documented. I've also had a particular curiosity about the stone fence across the street and just east of the mound, which seems to have been built with many pieces of cut stone. And you can see here just the kind of stone. It's not just typical kinds of rocks that one finds in the field, but certainly dressed and fashioned stone. And one wonders how many inscriptions may actually be buried in that fence. Of course, it will be fascinating to see what public buildings will be unearthed at Colossae, especially anything contemporaneous with the New Testament era. Will excavators find the typical Roman structures, such as a bath complex, an Odeon, a Nymphaeum, a Prytaneum, and the site of an agora? What temples will be discovered? What deities will have been honored and worshiped there? Will they discover much from the Hellenistic period and before? Will more evidence of the occupation of the site during the late Chalcolithic and Bronze Age be discovered? And what about Roman and Byzantine era discoveries? Will they discover evidence of the famed church of St. Michael the Archangel? There's so much that could be uncovered. And Professor Yaner, it's fascinating just to see what you've already discovered in the pottery remains of the city. I know that Professor Yaner has already done this, but I thought I would just provide also a brief orientation to the location of Colossae, especially for those who may not be as familiar with the area. Colossae was located along an important trade route about 120 miles due east of Ephesus. It is just a few miles east of the modern city of Denizli and about 160 miles to the southeast of the major coastal city of Izmir. Colossae was only 8 miles southeast of Laodicea and 10 miles southeast from Hierapolis. The city was situated in the southwestern portion of the territory of Phrygia, which became part of the Roman province of Asia in the 2nd century BC. The highest peak of Asia Minor's Aegean region, Mount Cadmus, 8,200 feet in elevation, overlooks Colossae a short distance to the south. And I just got to say, the setting of Colossae is spectacularly beautiful. Colossae in the entire Lycus Valley was rocked by a major earthquake in the early 60s of the 1st century. Geological studies of the faults in the Denizli Basin demonstrate a capability of producing an earthquake ranging as high as 6.5 to 7.1 on the Richter scale. We, of course, don't know the exact magnitude of the earthquake that struck in the early 60s, but based on the testimony of Tacitus and Strabo, we know that it was devastating. And it was devastating to nearby Laodicea and Hierapolis. This is particularly interesting to New Testament interpreters because this event would likely have happened just shortly after Paul wrote his letter to Christians there, assuming the authenticity of the letter. Hopefully, the excavation of Colossae will reveal evidence of this earthquake and the impact it had on the city. Previous generations of scholars have thought that because of the evidence, Colossae may have been depopulated immediately after this earthquake, with the population shifting to nearby Honaz. But as Professor Yaner has shown, there was continuous population through the centuries. Up to the time of Hadrian is a bit of mystery, though. Australian scholar Alan Cadwallader has written some significant studies on this particular topic and has convincingly dispelled the notion that Colossae was no longer occupied in the centuries that followed. And I will expect that excavation will confirm that Colossae rebuilt and persisted. I hope that we find what evidence there may be of just the period from Nero to Hadrian in that era. The excavation of Colossae holds the promise of yielding a great deal of information that will shed light on the Apostle Paul's letter to the Colossians. Although the letter is less than 1,600 words in the Greek text, there are many aspects of this letter that could be illuminated through archaeological discovery. But I need to be careful of overstating this potential because much of the vocabulary and theological content of the letter is held in common with Paul's other letters and is derived from the Old Testament, especially the Septuagint, especially when we think of terms like circumcision, grace, truth, peace, faith, love, saints, thanksgiving, watchfulness, prayer, and many more. But much of the language and imagery of Colossians was also held in common with the Greek-speaking Roman world. So the discovery of Greek inscriptions will prove to be enormously helpful for the interpretation of Colossians. and I would anticipate that many inscriptions will be discovered over the years through the course of discovery at Colossae. These writings on stone are some of the principal evidences of Koine Greek. The most widely debated interpretational issue in Colossians is the identity of the opposing teaching that Paul polemicized against in the letter, and that he found to be dangerous to the health and stability of the fledgling Colossian church. And it's precisely here that archaeological discovery at Colossae could solve a centuries-old riddle. This issue lends itself to illumination by archaeology because Paul cites many of the catchwords and practices of the factional teachers. Many scholars, like myself, believe that these opponents within the church had combined their faith with local Phrygian religious rituals and practices. If this is indeed the case, then it's entirely conceivable that an increased knowledge of the local religions and their practices could bring invaluable light to this issue and potentially unlock the secrets of this problem at Colossae. Let me provide 3 examples of the kind of statements from the letter to the Colossians that could be illuminated by the inscriptions, statements from the catchwords of the opponents at Colossae. Number 1, in Colossians chapter 2, verse 18, Paul says that the opponents engaged in the worship of angels. Well, various kinds of inscriptions mentioning angels are common in Western Asia Minor and in Phrygia, but many of these have to do with people invoking or calling upon angels for help or deliverance. Most recently, an angel inscription was found in a tomb in nearby Hierapolis that reads as follows: I adjure you by God who created the earth and the heavens. I adjure you by the angels, by the cherubim, the harmony above. I adjure you by Michael, Raphael, Abrasax, that I might be averted from injury. I did have a picture of that came from a publication in Epigraphica Anatolica, and this inscription was published in 2005. A beautiful silver lamella that had been rolled up and placed within this tomb. This is a very common way for these kinds of texts to be discovered in the context of a tomb. A similar kind of invocation text was found in the upper Meander Valley a few miles west of Colossae. This text does not mention any of the Jewish angels in the syncretistic mix that characterized the previous text, but it invokes Hecate, a goddess of witchcraft, and Hermes, who are referred to as angels in other inscriptions. It also refers to a number of other underworld beings to effect a curse against a man named Macrinus. It reads, I adjure you, demons, by the name written on this tablet, that you would carry out judgment on Marius Macrinus. I adjure you by her, Gay, Thon, Hecate, Chthonic Hermes, underworld Lete. I adjure you by them and the rest of the gods, that you would carry out judgment on Macrinus. I adjure you, demons, by the underworld gods. The Greek term angelos was clearly not strictly a Christian or Jewish term. It was widely used in pagan religion and referred to an intermediary spirit who could serve as a messenger of the gods or lend help or aid. And as we've seen here, these figures could be invoked not only for protection, but to carry out a curse against someone. Angels figure prominently in the curse tablets and magical texts of the day. There's also much evidence from Judaism that Jews performed exorcisms by calling upon angels to effect the deliverance. This is particularly characteristic of the methods reflected in the so-called Testament of Solomon, which the editor of the first published critical text of this document thought originated in Western Asia Minor. Since the term for worship in the description of the opponent's teaching in Colossians 2:18, since that term is not the common word for worship, which is proskuneo, but is a term that implied ritual, threskeia, I think that the proper way to interpret the phrase is rituals involving angels or invoking angels in Colossians 2:18. So the question is, will new inscriptions be discovered at Colossae, either Jewish, Christian, or pagan, that mention angels and give local insight into how people living there invoked or called upon angels? I would consider this to be a distinct possibility for this kind of discovery to take place. Number two, pardon me for just a moment. There is yet another term that appears in Colossians 2:18, describing the practices of the opposing teachers that is proved to be very enigmatic, yet it's crucial for the interpretation of the rival teaching. And that is the term embatuo. The basic meaning of the term is entering, and the text would then read, entering what he has seen. But what this means in context remains elusive. The far more common word for entering would be eis erchomai, or simply erchomai. And that is what we would have expected here. But Paul has chosen a word that is exceedingly rare and is likely citing it as a catchword of his rival teachers, a term that they were using. But why would they be using this rare term? The answer may lie in the fact that it was a technical term for the second and higher stage of ritual initiation in the mystery rites of Apollo at Kleros. From inscriptional data at Kleros, Laodicea, and Hierapolis, we know that delegations went from the Lycus Valley to consult the oracle of Apollo at Kleros, which was located just north of Ephesus. As part of the consultation process, some visitors went through the two-stage ritual of initiation. The second stage was called entering, or embatuo, involving descending and entering into the underground oracle grotto. This is an image from Kleros of the Temple of Apollo and the underground oracle grotto area. Unfortunately, that area is prone to flooding, and so it's filled with water right now. And most of the time, the entire area is filled with water. But it's quite possible, well, the second stage, called entering, involved descending into this underground oracle grotto. And it's here where they would have received visionary experience and then received the oracle from the inspired priest. It's quite possible then that the presence of this word in Colossians 2:18, coupled with visionary experience, the Greek word horao that is connected with it, reflects some kind of ritual initiation that was part of the experience of the rival teachers at Colossae. As we learn more about the local religious traditions of Colossae, there's great potential, I believe, for shedding light on such practices at Colossae itself. Of course, it'd be wonderful if we found the particular word embatuo in one or more of the religious inscriptions at Colossae. But at the minimum, I would expect that a temple of Apollo will be found at Colossae. It's numismatically attested, and hopefully with it, a number of inscriptions that give us insight into the local worship of Apollo, and possibly even more information about the relationship with the Clarion Apollo. The oracle god Apollo, it should be noted, was very popular in this region. There was a prominent temple of Apollo adjacent to the plutonium at Hierapolis. And the plutonium, of course, was thought to be an opening to the underworld. Apollo was the principal deity of the city of Hierapolis, where he appeared in two forms, Apollo Archaegetes and Apollo Lerbenos. He was also worshipped at Laodicea, where he appears on coins as early as the time of Claudius. Third, still with respect to the rival teaching at Colossae, Paul's letter to the Colossians is filled with language about spirit beings that Paul refers to with a variety of terms such as thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities, and elements, the Greek word behind that being stoicheia. Paul wants to assure his Colossian readers that Christ is superior to these powers by virtue of the fact that he is their creator and that he has defeated them by his death on the cross and his resurrection. Many of the terms Paul uses can be found in Jewish apocalyptic texts, but not all of them. And some of these terms are part of a common reservoir of terminology for supernatural powers that were shared across religious traditions. As Colossae is excavated and more religious inscriptions come to light, it's possible and hopeful that we may gain even more insight into this terminology, especially and hopefully the term stoicheia, which is only used by Paul in addressing churches in Anatolia. Because of the pervasive phenomena of curses, the evil eye, and magical practices in the Roman era, there was a deep and genuine fear of the supernatural realm and the many spirit beings who could affect the curses. The fear of this realm would not have disappeared for the Colossians who became Christians and entered the house churches. The big questions for them would be, where does Christ stand in relationship to these powers? And can Christ protect us from this realm? And part of the positive theological message of Colossians is that they no longer need to use traditional local methods for dealing with this phenomenon, but they can draw on the power and authority of Christ by virtue of their union with him as their resurrected Lord. But more than possibly finding these various terms for these powers in the inscriptions at Colossae, I'm hopeful that the excavation will provide us with a deeper understanding more generally of the local religious traditions, as well as the local folk belief and practices. My own interpretation of the problem at Colossae, reflected in Paul's letter, is that it has much more to do with this phenomenon, the phenomena of magic and shamanism, than with any form of school philosophy such as Cynicism or Middle Platonism, or even Gnosticism. While I think that the problem at Colossae does have Jewish elements as part of it, I believe it has more to do with syncretistic Jewish magical practices than the kind of Jewish visionary mysticism we find reflected in certain Qumran texts, or the kind of Merkabah mysticism seen in a book like Third Enoch. It's highly likely that in the course of the excavations at Colossae, more material evidence of magical practices will be uncovered in the form of amulets and curse tablets. What these inscriptions say could shed very helpful light on the teaching and practices that the Apostle Paul opposed at Colossae. It's quite possible and perhaps even likely that the church at Colossae got its start in the Jewish community there. Although Epaphras, the founder of the church at Colossae, was probably a Gentile, Paul's influence upon him would have led him to proclaim Jesus as Messiah within the Colossian Jewish community. Paul's strategy was always to begin his proclamation of Jesus as Messiah in the Jewish synagogues of the diaspora, and through that to reach not only Jews, but Gentile God-fearers. He told the Roman church that the gospel was the power of God to salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, then also to the Greek. But as of yet, we have no firm evidence of a Jewish community at Colossae. We only know that there was a sizable Jewish population in the territory of Phrygia, and that Jewish presence is well attested at nearby Laodicea and Hierapolis. I would expect that excavation will reveal over time material evidence of Jewish presence at Colossae as well. Of course, it would be incredibly helpful if the remains of a synagogue were discovered somewhere along the banks of the nearby Lycus River, where there would have been a freshwater source for the ritual purity washings. Any discovery of symbols of Jewish presence, however, could potentially bring much light to the letter of Colossians. The potential discovery of Jewish inscriptions would be very helpful. Yet another way that excavation will help illuminate Colossians is through the discovery of symbols of Roman rule and power in the city. Some of the language and imagery of Colossians clearly reflects Roman power. Most notably is the term thriambuo in Colossians 2:15, which Paul uses to dramatically portray Christ's defeat of the principalities and powers by his death on the cross. Thriambuo is the term for a Roman triumphal procession when a victorious general led his defeated foes in a humiliating parade before the cheering Roman crowds. I forgot to put up this particular picture of the plutonium over at Hierapolis. One wonders if excavators will find any imagery like what was found in the Sebastion at Aphrodisias, just 40 miles southwest of Colossae. The Sebastion was an enormous temple complex dedicated to Aphrodite and the Julio-Claudian emperors, and had numerous marble reliefs of the emperors and the goddess Roma depicting various peoples brought under subjugation by Roman might. What you see depicted on the screen now is a relief of the Emperor Claudius with Britannia shown in a picture of humiliation and subjection under his might. Such signs of Roman imperial power might bring more light to other language and imagery used in Colossians and help us interpret the nature of the claims made about Christ as Lord over everything on earth, as well as in heaven. One of the chief propaganda slogans of the empire from the Augustan age forward was the era of the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, celebrating the widespread peace brought by Roman rule. Yet Christ is extolled in Colossians as the one who will bring universal peace through the subjugation of his enemies. Scholar Harry Meyer has written much on this theme and has suggested ways that this helps us to interpret the language and message of Colossians. You know, there are just numerous other ways that the excavation of Colossae could help illuminate features of the discourses in this brief letter. Let me just bring this to a conclusion by mentioning 7 of these particular ways. Number 1, the Colossian household code was the first attested use of this form in Christian literature. Will any of the discoveries at Colossae further illuminate the domestic relationship between husbands and wives and children and parents? Number 2, will we find any material evidence of the institution of slavery that was widespread throughout the empire and present at Colossae? Further evidence could shed light on this portion of the Colossian household code, as well as on the letter to Philemon. 3, will any inscriptional evidence be discovered that will illuminate the references to barbarian and Scythian in Colossians 2:11? The mention of Scythians in particular has proven perplexing to many scholars. Some have strained to find some local connection with Scythians. Alan Cadwallader has suggested that one of the names in a list of 66 names on a recently discovered column from Colossae may have been Thracian or even specifically Scythian. But this depends on a reconstruction. It's highly speculative and would still be very slim evidence for a Scythian connection with Colossae. Ulrich Huttner suggests the possibility that a memory of the Sumerian expulsion of the Scythians had survived in the area. The Scythians were a people group driven out of the territory north of the Black Sea in the 7th century BC and then overthrew Phrygia. But this was hundreds of years earlier, and there's no local evidence, as of yet, of an ongoing memory of this event. Is it possible that there was a Scythian population in Colossae? In this regard, inscriptional evidence could prove very illuminating. 4, will inscriptions further illuminate some of the onomastics or names mentioned in Colossians, such as the names Epaphras, Nympha, Onesimus, Archippus, and others? Colossians 4:15, for instance, says, "Greet the brothers in Laodicea and Nympha and the church in her house." Or should this text read, "Greet Nymphos and the church in his house"? The difference here is a text critical problem and reflects a difference among manuscripts. Inscriptional evidence could help with this issue. The masculine form of the name, Nymphos, appears in at least 5 different inscriptions found in Western Asia Minor, whereas the feminine form is never attested in the regional inscriptions. If we were to find the feminine form of the name in a Colossian inscription, it would certainly help to decide the debate. 5, Colossians 2:14 uses the Greek word cheirographon as a metaphor to describe the written record of debt that stood against believers before God because of their sin. The good news of Colossians is that Christ took this, canceled it, and nailed it to the cross. Is it possible that this word may be attested somewhere in the yet to be discovered inscriptions? 6, Colossians uses athletic imagery, such as the term agon, translated struggle in Colossians 2:1, katabrabuo, translated disqualify in Colossians 2:18, and brabuo, translated judge as in an athletic context in Colossians 3:15. Will excavations provide insight into the role of athletics at Colossae? And finally, 7, Colossians also uses a number of clothing metaphors, such as taking off and putting on. Rosemary Canavan, who is on this call today, has provided a very helpful monograph-linked study of the use of this imagery. Canavan has made a strong case for interpreting this language in accordance with what she calls the social, political, visual landscape in which the text was crafted and heard, a process she calls visual exegesis. The clothing people wore was a marker of their identity. Well, I would anticipate that the excavation of Colossae would provide even more illustrative evidence of this metaphor. There's far more that I could mention, where I believe the excavation of Colossae will help to illuminate the text of Colossians and bring a greater depth of understanding to this cherished letter. We do not need the excavation of Colossae for us to understand and interpret the theological content of the message of the letter. But the discoveries coming from this archaeological initiative could help solve some interpretational riddles embedded in the text of Colossians, and will certainly provide more color and depth to our understanding of the letter. I'm in the final stages of completing a commentary on Colossians for the Word Biblical Commentary series. I only wish that this excavation had been carried out before I began this commentary. I've relied extensively upon archaeological and inscriptional evidence from the Lycus Valley and Phrygia in the writing of the commentary. And now I will await with eager anticipation to see if the discoveries at Colossae may confirm or further illustrate what I've written. But I must admit, I also wonder how many times I will need to say, I'm sorry, I got that wrong, when discoveries at Colossae bring new things to light and correct my interpretations. Thank you, and I look forward to our further discussion about these matters.
Mark, you have to unmute.
There we go. Sorry. Clint, thank you for that very articulate, informative, really a sweeping way that you believe that the excavation at Colossae can illuminate the New Testament record, especially the letters related to the site there. And we look forward to your commentary. When will that be released?
Well, it has to be finished first, so I'm hoping I can bring it to completion in this next year.
Okay, well, our best wishes for that, and we do look forward to it. So we have one speaker left, and one of the wonders of webinars and the technology we have today through Zoom is we can have speakers on various continents. So we began in Asia, moved to North America, now we're moving over to Europe, where our respondent, Anna Enberg, is going to be coming to us from Lundsbro, Sweden. And I have known Anna for over a decade. We met here in Turkey. And I must say that my great-grandparents came from a little village about a couple hundred kilometers north of where she is right now, and moved there in the 1890s to Minnesota. So we share that Swedish heritage. Anna has a degree in archaeology from Lund University. During her academic training, she also studied at Bilkent University in Ankara. And it's during this time, I believe, that we met. During her time in Turkey, she worked on 2 seasons at a wonderful site in southwestern Turkey at Labranda. There, as she's worked also at the St. Umobono excavation in Rome. So she's a trained archaeologist as well as a biblical scholar. She just received a prestigious bursary to study for a PhD at Lund University in Biblical Studies. And she will be focusing her study on our topic today on Colossians. And her project will be combining social rhetorical and social identity approach with attention given to rhetoric, historical, social, religious, and philosophical context of the author and the recipients. So Anna, it's great to have you with us, and we look forward to your response on archaeology and interpreting Colossians.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and also thank you to Levent and Tutku as well, and to Mark, who invited me and gave me this opportunity to actually give a response to these 2 excellent presentations that we heard. Yeah, as he mentioned, I'm a PhD candidate in New Testament studies at Lund University. As you can see behind me here, it's not really summer here right now, so the picture is kind of wrong in that way, but still, this is my academic home. And the topic of my research will be, as you heard, Colossians. And I had an email conversation with Clinton before this event, or leading up to this event, and he wrote that it's a perfect timing for starting a dissertation project on Colossians, and I have to agree. I'm very excited about this, especially for someone like me who have a background in classical archaeology and have a special interest in exploring the significance of Greco-Roman context for New Testament exegesis. More specifically, I'm interested in studying religious change or conversion as it is mirrored in the letter to the Colossians. I have this hypothesis that the letter can be seen as a key contribution to a longer process of identity change in the recipients. And in my opinion, these recipients most likely or predominantly or even exclusively pagan. And on this point, I might differ a little bit from Clinton, I don't know, who envisioned a community sprung from a Jewish setting. Maybe that can be a topic for discussion later. Anyway, initially, I would like to point out that I don't limit my interest to the recipient's previous religious identity. And this is very conscious since I believe that religious, political, civic, local, ethnic or social identity, all of that, those are very interconnected concepts in antiquity. And therefore, I see the usefulness of archaeology for biblical interpretation as something very overreaching. Almost anything that illuminates the context to which the letter was written can be of interest. And in the field of New Testament studies, a lot of work has gone into researching the background of Jewish Christ believers in the early church. Great advances has been made when it comes to our understanding of Second Temple Judaism during the last 20, 30 years. But not nearly as much has been done in relation to the background of Greco-Roman Christ believers. Of course, theologians have a general understanding of polytheistic religion, and there's also often a specific interest in the conflict between the early church and the imperial cult. But there's much more work to be done here, I think. And for this to be done in a fruitful way, I think you need to pay much more attention to local contexts, since the Greco-Roman world is incredibly rich and diverse. And this gives us the reason to delve into today's topic, archaeology and interpreting Colossians. I have been given the task here to summarize and respond to these presentations that we heard. By Dr. Barış, we have been given a fascinating glimpse of the archaeological project initiated at Colossae and also the great potential of further investigations. And we have also heard from Dr. Clint and Arnold on the possible uses of new archaeological finds for interpreting Colossians. I will try to summarize and comment on this by categories of archaeological remains or findings. So firstly, I will talk a little bit about inscriptions or epigraphy. Here we have a very important contribution that has already been given by Dr. Arnold in previous publications and also in his talk here today. He has really taken on this task of researching the epigraphic evidence of Asia Minor with the purpose of providing context for several of these enigmatic words and expressions that we have in Colossians. And this has really contributed, I think, to theologians' understanding of local Anatolian and Phrygian religious practices and also their bearing on expressions like few of them he mentioned, Threskeia ton angelon and ha eoraken embateon, and also the stocheia terminology. If new inscriptions come to light, as they most certainly will, we can hopefully get more clues to how the content of the letter should be understood. But I would also like to point out that this is not Only true when similar vocabulary is found. Inscriptions are also of interest in a more general sense, as they can give us more knowledge about the specific local identity of the Colossians in several different ways. They can shed light on social conditions such as family relationships, slavery, and also the possible existence of local, religious, or guild-like associations. The latter could introduce us to various group identities within the city with which the early Christ believers would have had to compete. One of the things that makes the existence or the possible existence of associations relevant to the study of Colossians is that associations could hypothetically have been places of religious interaction between pagans and Jews and different religious ideas and practices. And as such, they could be one component that might give us a background to this, which seems to be the syncretistic tendencies of the rival teaching in Colossians. And now to the second category of archaeological evidence. In both presentations, the possibility of unearthing monumental architectural remains and infrastructure was implied, at least. And this is, of course, important for understanding the development of the city over time, and also for determining the status of the city in the first century. And as we have already heard a lot about, it will most likely bury this long-held idea by theologians that Colossae was irreparably damaged and not rebuilt after the earthquake in the early 60s. And it's very interesting to see this new pottery survey that Barış presented, which actually shows this continuous settlement from the late Chalcolithic to the Seljuk period, which kind of settles the case, in my view. Apart from this issue, the extent of monumental architecture and infrastructure will help us to understand the position of the city in the Lycus Valley, and also its competitive force in relation to the larger cities of Hierapolis and Laodicea. When monuments and buildings can be connected to individual benefactors, that's even more interesting, and that usually happens through inscriptions, and they can give us an idea of the economic and social standing of its leading citizens. And Barış showed one very fragmentary inscription of an Euergetes, a benefactor of some kind. And another example of such an inscription that has not been mentioned here today is the so-called Korumbos Bomos, which was discovered in 2005 and published by Alan Cadwallader. And this inscription has been dated to the late 1st or early 2nd century, and it mentions repairs on the baths of Colossae, and mentions a benefactor called Korumbos, and several other names are also mentioned on this Bomos. So the next category of finds that I would like to comment on is statues, friezes, and other artistic artifacts. Such remains can, among other things, give us a window into understanding which religious and mythical beliefs were prominent in this local context. The images found in the city can tell us much about the worldview and the identity of its inhabitants. I think Clinton mentioned Harry O'Meara, but we also have Rosemary Canavan, who's here today, who has drawn on such materials to illuminate the practices of imperial cult in this local area, and also shown possible connection to counter ideas or a counter ideology in Colossians. And this is a branch of research that would be greatly helped by new local finds in the Lycus Valley. A specific kind of evidence that contains both texts and images are, of course, coins. Barış gave us a few examples in his presentations, and the sample he gave us mirrors the fact that there is a big gap in the coinage from Colossae that we have from the 2nd century BC to the Hadrianic period. So it would be very exciting if new and earlier coin types could be discovered. Coins are so significant since they present us with the official and identity of a city, often in relation to mythological ideas of its foundation. For example, in a previous seminar, the one that Mark mentioned in the beginning here, he himself gave a talk on the coinage of another Phrygian city, the city of Apamea, which connects to the story of Noah and the flood. And this is also something that Paul Trubilko has previously written about. And this is a very interesting local example of how a city's mythology can be expressed through coinage. It's also a very significant example since it shows the willingness in this area to mix pagan and Jewish ideas. So to conclude, new numismatic findings could be very helpful to illuminate how the city of Colossae and its demos wanted to present itself to the world. The last category of archaeological finds that I would like to comment on is that of graves and burial practices. One of the very interesting accomplishments already made by Barış and his team is the documentation of a large number of graves in the Colossae necropolis and other areas surrounding the city. There is a German archaeologist named Untitled who has written a lot about grave types in Phrygia in general, and also studied how they can be said to express local identity. And hopefully the local grave types and grave customs in Colossae can be compared to this other previously published and studied material by Kelp and others, and help us to place Colossae on the map of Greater Phrygia, and to understand what this says about the local identity. Graves and grave inscriptions in particular also tend to give us a very valuable information on social circumstances such as family relationships. And Barış actually showed us two examples that really shows this, two examples that named a husband and a wife, two different stelae. So finally, I would like to conclude that the archaeological project at Colossae in time will be able to contribute to a significantly better understanding of the historical, religious, political, and social context of the letters to the Colossians. But it's also significant to state that archaeology is important, of course, for its own sake, apart from its use for New Testament studies. And in my opinion, archaeological excavations will likely not be able to settle theological debates beyond dispute anyway, because archaeology as a discipline is also largely dependent on interpretation, of course. But that said, archaeology can give both historians and theologians much more evidence to work with. And that's what we like to have. So yeah, I'm gonna end there.
Thank you for a great response, Anna, and tying everything together. Before we get to all of your questions, I want to give both Barış and Clint an opportunity to respond. And Barış, can you explain to our audience too what the next step for the survey as you begin now to look toward excavation?
Yes, it's a really hard question, because that you see the whole mount, the area of the Acropolis is owned by privates. It's a private area with 3 parcels. I think 1 month ago I talked with the mayor of Honaz, and he told me that we can get it to our own lands to exchange with the landowners. And maybe after that, if we accomplish that, we will start an excavation, maybe not 2022, maybe in 2021, 23. We can say like this, but next year we can also make intensive surveys also in the lower terraces, because the intensive survey area is very limited last year, and we will should make the intensive survey area larger, and to evaluate a topographic plan also. And the information board is missing in the area, as you know, and we have to put like this an information board there. That's our objectives in the upcoming years.
Okay. 2 other questions that I'm often asked is financial support needed for an excavation like this as you go forward. And also, many people have worked on archaeological excavations and volunteered in Israel and other places, and they've asked me, is it possible to volunteer in Turkey? And I said, I've explained the Turkish system is very different to be able to do that. So could you answer those 2 questions?
Yes, it's really hard to gather a team for an excavation and find supports for the excavation, because we have this year 10 people for the surveys, and our main supporter is the mayor of Honaz, and he gave us all the material and our food and some technical supports like this. But if the excavation will start in the future, we need a lot money, and we need an excavation house probably, and depots like this. But maybe the easiest way in the first years, we can go Denizli and back to Denizli out of an excavation house. Maybe it's a solution at the beginning of the excavation years, but our objective is to excavate Colossae, as you see in our efforts.
Thank you. Clint, have you got any response? Anything that Anna said?
Well, not much to add there, just that, yeah, I find myself in large agreement with everything that she's affirming there. The role of inscriptions in understanding identity is very, very significant. Of course, my remarks were focused primarily on Paul's letter to the Colossians, but Colossae is such a bigger site and project than that one slice of time. And we've seen the chronology of the occupation of the city. So there's an inherent interest just in the city itself and its history and what can be revealed there from the earliest stages, late Chalcolithic, even the Hittite era. I mean, can we learn anything more about that? And it's a fascinating process that will unfold as we gain more and more insight into this particular city and its role in the area.
Well, great. So this is your turn now. And so we'd like to have you raise your hand here if you want to ask a question. And let me emphasize to ask a question rather than making a statement. So direct your question then to the appropriate individual. So do we have someone to start? Okay, Rosemary. And you'll have to, there you go, unmute yourself.
Thanks so much, Mark. I wanted to ask Barış, and I realize it's early, but whether you have any idea of the orientation of the city from where the theater is and the necropolis. So where might you expect to find agora or such?
It's really new survey area. We have to find out in the upcoming years, because last year we have a limited time to see all the area with a small group of archaeologists. Maybe next year, or not next year, this year, at the end of the August, we will want to start for the survey. I think 15 August till 15 September. Probably, as you saw from the publications, at the east side of the mount or the Acropolis should be in front of the theater, should be an agora. Last year we couldn't make any geophysical surveys because of also it's all about money, and I don't have also a device for the geophysical survey. Maybe we could make some geophysical surveys in front of the also road and behind the road. Maybe we could find some material culture, some also structures with the help of the new technology. I think we have to wait. We have to wait for new structures.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Teşekkürler.
Next question. Mike Carsley.
Good morning. Very interesting discussion. I guess what I'm hearing is that part of the problem with excavation is you don't own the property. Is that, and so they don't want you to have access or ability to excavate.
Yeah, we have access for a survey, but now for the legal excavations, you should the government should have the lands in Colossae. It's not possible to excavate in a private area in Colossae because it's private areas and it's not possible.
So privately owned. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, but the mayor of Honaz, the town, told me that yes, we will exchange our lands to the 3 parcels in Colossae Mount. Maybe after that we will have a chance to excavate in Colossae.
Barış, you need to persuade him there'll be a lot of tourists coming to Honaz in the future, bring some money into the city.
Yes,
you're saying the city could trade some of their property for this property you need to excavate. Is that what you're mentioning?
Sorry, I don't get.
So the city might trade some of the mayor might trade some property.
Yes, true. Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Next question.
I can't find the thing for to raise my hand, so I'm just going to jump in. I just simply wanted to ask Barış, just in front of the theater and across the street are these stone fences, and I'm assuming that's all private property because it's orchards and so on, but I don't know if a site survey would be adequate permission for dismantling some of the fences to see what kind of stones we find there and possibilities of inscriptions.
Yes, we are focusing on the inscriptions. We are planning to find a lot of inscriptions, especially in the necropolis area on the north side. Yes, you are right. The bounded areas with fences are closed, but we are maybe illegally we should enter there and to find some new inscriptions. But as you see, the vegetation in the area is very hard to see. The architectural material, also inscriptions, is really hard. We have to first clean it to find something, because, as you know, there is a lot of water, and where is water, and there is also so much vegetation. I think Francesco Guzzi is now among us here. He is also listening us. He is our epigraphist from Rome, Sapienza, University of Sapienza, and we make a project about the inscriptions of Colossae, and I think from March to July I will be in Rome with the new project of North Necropolis of Colossae, and we will publish a new article maybe about inscription and the necropolis of the Colossae.
Barış, I want to ask you a question about the site. It's on the north side coming up from the river valley. There seems to be a ramp on the side of the Acropolis. Is that ramp the original access road up to the top?
The ramp on the mount?
Yeah, the north side. It looks to me there's a ramp there that I've walked up the top on.
Possibly, if we will excavate it, we will find some, possibly an original road, maybe some steps there. Maybe you are right about it. Yes.
Okay. Yes, Pastor, your hand is up.
Yes, that ramp that Mark is talking about, as you walk up to the left, there seems to be a cave-like structure to the left. Could you tell us what that is all about, Barış?
Thank you. I think it's a very early illegal excavation, and the thieves made it, and now you can see. I think you visited the area, and you can see because of this illegal excavation, we see now some traces of the maybe a building. We don't know clearly about it, but it's not originally a cave of the thieves. They like this, yes.
Anna, I think you've got a question.
Yes, I also have a question for Barış, which is maybe kind of specific, but I have registered that there has been a previous pottery survey done by Barış Duman and Konakci, and one difference in results, if I understood or interpret them correctly, is that you have a lower count for the early Byzantine period, whereas this previous survey seems to indicate a rather high count for the early Byzantine period. So what are your thoughts on this? And also in general, how does these two surveys complement each other, the results?
Originally, yes, actually, we made the same area, and the survey is on the same area, but we found some pottery they couldn't found in their survey, Professor Duman and Konakçı. They start the chronology from the late Chalcolithic period, what we have now early Chalcolithic period material. Also, they couldn't find any Iron Age material. We have found also 2 fragments. I told in the presentation, maybe belonging to the Lydian tradition. I think it changed something with our survey, and also it will be changed because intensive survey studies will be continued, not just on the mount, not just on the hill. We will make some walking along close vicinity, and I think it will change this maybe the chronology of the Colossi in general.
Next question. All good questions.
Sorry, Mark, I can't raise my hand, but I can talk.
Okay, Cynthia.
My question is really for Clint, because I'm interested in the role of Hecate and Hercules and these magical practices, because I'm thinking of in the Istanbul Archaeology Museum, there's that wonderful funeral stele, which appears to be about the same time as the Christian for Christian stele in Phrygia. And this one has at the top, there's a big Artemis with the crescent moon. Then there's Menesgenos, Hecate, and Hercules. So I'm wondering if we know anything about the religious practices in this Phrygian area, and can we make any connection or sense out of what may be going on, how widespread this was, or just more information on that? Do I make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Let me venture a possible response to this. Hecate was a uniquely Asia Minor deity. The cult center for this was down in Caria in Lagina, and there was a temple there and so on. But Hecate is widely attested in statuary and epigraphy, but not well known in the literature as much. And I don't think we have, there's not a lot of evidence yet of her presence in the Lycus Valley. There's some, as I showed with one inscription today, but she was probably the most called upon deity in the Greek magical papyri, and also in the curse tablets. She has a close relationship with Artemis, and in fact, evidence of the Hecate sanctuary adjacent to the Artemis temple in Ephesus. But she was also known as a goddess of the crossroads. And so you have these triple Hecate statues that appear in crossroads, and that's where she's often referred to in the literature. But it's a bit scattered, and I hope we can find more evidence to show what this deity was all about.
Thank you.
Pastor, did you have another question, or else you need to put your hand down?
No, I had to put my hand down. I put it up again.
Oh,
This is
okay.
again, this is another simple question. Coming from the north to the left, there is a stream. You can hear that, you can walk up to it and so on. How is that connected to the Lycus River? This is to Barış.
The connection of the Lycus River.
No, when you come from the north to the left of the road, there is a stream that you can see, and you can walk to it if you like. Majid took us there when we went there, and so that little stream, how is that connected with the Lycus River?
I think you are talking about the Aksu River in front of the mount.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Across
Aksu,
the road.
Yeah. Aksu River, yes, it's with a very interesting geological form, and I think 2 miles or 3 miles away, under the new Deniz Afyon road, it connects to Lycus River, and we have I called it Aksu River because it's we don't know clearly the exact name of the Aksu River in ancient times. Maybe Herodotus and Strabo and the other ancient writers mentioned Aksu River as Lycus River, the Çürüksu in Turkish, and probably it's the not a different name river, but they call it Lycus, and we accept it as Lycus River, and 3 miles away it's also connected to Lycus River.
Thank you.
So Barış, where the bridge goes over the road there, you go underneath, you can see an old bridge covered with concrete. Is that Roman period? Have you examined it?
Yeah, it's probably, I couldn't show it in this presentation, but it looks like, yes, it's Roman, and we trace it after this bridge, a necropolis road, we trace it, we find some clues about it. Yes, it connects also to the necropolis, North Necropolis, and probably to the north way, maybe to the Laodicea or the Hierapolis. It's a main road of the city on the north side. Yes.
I couldn't tell, Barış, on the map that you showed how far north the site survey you intend to do would extend, but would it include that river there, that small river? And the reason I'm interested is it seems to me that with the kind of living water that was necessary for the water installations for the Jewish synagogues, that there might be something along that Lycus River, some evidence of a synagogue, if there were a synagogue in that area. And I just wonder if the site survey could extend that far north.
Yes, it's not far away, as the necropolis area is very close. After the Aksu River, I think maybe 500 meters to the north, and yes, we want to see some surface material with surveys, but I told you that before, it's really hard to trace some material on the surface because of vegetation. Yes, as you know, I hope we could find a lot because this year I have a plan to walk through the Aksu River, the huge gorge about the river, because in ancient cities you could find a lot of material inside these valleys of the rivers. I think this year's objective is to find out what inside in this Aksu Valley.
So all those stelae that we saw to the north there that you were showing, will there be an attempt to conserve those or to take them and collect them?
we apply for move them to the close to the mount of the Bekçi kulübe and the security, and where you enter the area. We have a plan, I think in the summer, with cranes. We put them out and move them to the close area, to the mount, where the visitors to enter the area, and they will see clearly the stelae of Colossae, and it's also a protective area, and I think it will be good for their preservation.
Excellent.
Our plan, yes.
Yeah, good. That's good.
And maybe new inscriptions, because some of them we couldn't touch. They're upside down, and when we carry, and we will see new inscriptions also.
Good. Benjamin.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, I have a question also for Barış, and it relates to the enormous role that the honor of the city played also during the Greco-Roman period. At this point, is there sort of any indication what was the main honor of the city of Colossae? What was the claim to fame, especially in the 1st century?
In the 1st century,
Yes.
we are talking about the beginning of the Imperial Roman. Yes,
That's right.
Yeah, it's really, we don't know about the earliest period of the Roman Colossae. We could have to find out what about, because there is no ancient sources about the beginning of the century, because we know a theory that when the foundation of Laodicea and Hierapolis in the 3rd century will begin, and after that, the Colossae's importance is going down because of maybe Laodicea is a little bit more reachable about the trade system, trade road system. Maybe it's all about that. And then we have, not beginning of the 1st century, but at the second half of the 1st century, there is a big earthquake that I told before. And after that, there is a huge gap about chronology of the 1st century of the Colossae. And I think we could find more in the upcoming years about the 1st century, maybe. It's all about, I can say about the 1st century of Colossae, because it's nothing now, it's our hands.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, is there a last question before we dismiss you all? Some of you are beginning your day, some of you are getting ready to go to bed. Well, on behalf of Tutku Tours, I really want to thank our 3 presenters, Barış, Clint, Arnold, and Anna Enberg, for their excellent presentations, stimulating, a lot to think about. And we thank you, all of you, for joining from whatever continent or country you're coming from. You can tell your friends that this webinar is being recorded, and they'll be able to see that on the Tutku Tours website in about a week when that's uploaded. And we look forward to traveling with you in Turkey or somewhere here in the Eastern Mediterranean one of these days. So, and we look forward to another webinar next year, Barış, when we have another report from you. So thank you all for joining us.
I hope so. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.